Sato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritam gamaya avir maeti rudra yakte dakshinamukam te namam pahi nityam. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. From the unreal lead us to the real. From darkness lead us unto light. From death lead us to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Om, peace, peace, peace. The topic today is the transformation of character and consciousness. In our search for God, we seek to spiritualize our lives through the transformation of our character. And we want to transform our lives right now in whatever situation we find ourselves. Swami Ashokananda once called it spiritualizing everyday life. Spiritual aspiration plays a big part in this transformation of our character and also in the transformation of our consciousness. It provides the motive power. It's the yearning for God that overcomes the inertia natural to the body and the mind and pushes the soul inward, Godward. This pushes us forward toward God and will not allow us to rest or give up our struggles. It is the thing which powers all our spiritual practices. One of the ways to transform ourselves is to practice Swami Vivekananda's ideal of service, of Jiva as Shiva, or worship of the God that is the inner essence of all people, through service. This practice is not the same as simply doing good work or some other preliminary practices of karma yoga. His ideal of service means working through love, working through freedom. Karma yoga means becoming united with God through selfless work. But the ideal of service actually implies one step more, working with the knowledge of the oneness of the universe in universal harmony and love. It is worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. We have to begin our practice from where we are standing in order to realize this truth. And this is why it's so important to understand how we get from point A to point B, how we take the next step for us. How can we transform our characters until in the end we become purified and our very consciousness is lifted up and transmuted into divine reality? Karma yoga is a very useful tool for us in the beginning stages of the transformation of character. But just doing good action alone is not enough. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the Master tells Vidyasagar, who was known to do many good works, quote, "The activities that you're engaged in are good. It's very good if you can perform them in a selfless spirit, renouncing egotism, giving up the idea that you're the doer. Through such actions, one develops love and devotion to God and ultimately realizes Him. By philanthropic activities, you are really doing good to yourself. If you can do these activities disinterestedly, your mind will become pure and you will develop love for God. As soon as you have that love, you will realize Him. The man who works for others without any selfish motive really does good to himself." That's the end of the quote. He said to Shambhu Malik, when Shambhu talked about establishing hospitals, dispensaries, and schools, and making roads and digging public reservoirs, I said to him, "Don't go out of your way to look for such works. Undertake only those works that present themselves to you and are of pressing necessity, and those also in a spirit of detachment. It's not good to become too involved in many activities. That makes one forget God. Coming to the Kaligat temple, some perhaps spend their whole time in giving alms to the poor. They have no time to see the mother in the inner shrine. First of all, man is somehow to see the image of the Divine Mother, even by pushing through the crowd. Then you may give alms to your heart's content. Work is only the means of realizing God. Therefore I said to Shambhu, suppose God appears before you, then will you ask him to build hospitals and dispensaries? A lover of God will never ask for such things. He will say, O Lord, give me a place at thy feet. Keep me always in thy company. Give me sincere and pure love for thee. Is it really possible to realize God through karma yoga, or does karma yoga simply purify the mind until the truth, which is its basis, shines forth naturally? In many Christian as well as Buddhistic monasteries, a monk lives the communal life for some time, but then when he reaches a certain stage, he retires for a time to solitude to perform tapasya. And only after this time does he return with a new knowledge to teach. We see in the Ramakrishna movement itself, many of the first disciples and even other revered monks have spent time in solitude, away from the duties of monastic life. It is here that their realizations become deep and lasting. Ramakrishna advises householders to retire for a few days now and then to solitude and meditate on God. Sometimes monks break away from traditional modes for some time and go on pilgrimage to holy places such as Varanasi or Vrindavan to practice austerities. We also do have examples of such swamis as Banbihari Maharaj in Varanasi, who served the poor throughout his life and became a knower of God through that practice. He worked there at the Sevashram for many years. However, he always continued with his contemplative practice as well, visiting the Vishwanath temple every morning and spending late afternoons at the Kedar Ghat temple in meditation. We have to hold on to our practice of meditation at the same time that we do our work. Most of us aren't really able to spend long hours in meditation. We need to work in order to keep our minds concentrated and to learn to control our will and activities. It's through work that we can progress to a state where it's possible for us to really feel our union with God no matter what we're doing. This is our spiritual practice. This is the idea behind all the philanthropic work done by the Ramakrishna Mission. Swami Vivekananda taught that even through work itself, one can realize the ultimate reality. Done with the right attitude, work purifies and concentrates the mind. Life is constantly changing our minds and bodies. The ego is a projection of the Atman onto this stream of existence. According to Ramakrishna, the ego is Maya. Ego reduction must be accomplished through self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice is impossible without love and compassion. This ripening of the ego is absolutely necessary in our spiritual life. When the fruit is ripe, it falls. When the fruit is unripe, it clings. If you're still clinging to the ego, to what you can do, remember the fruit isn't yet ripe, hence the clinging. If the fruit is ripe, it falls to the ground and disappears. So is the case with the ego. People who have not developed their egos can surrender, but their surrender won't be perfect. It won't be total. Something deep inside will go on clinging. Something inside will keep hoping. Maybe there's something I can do. Why am I surrendering? The work of the psychologist Maslow demonstrates that it's only after we have met our needs for food and water, then for safety, then love, then for a feeling of belonging, then for our need of self-esteem. Only then do we realize that we need to seek what Maslow terms self-actualization, to become actually what we deeply potentially are. While we are in the process of preparation, the undeveloped ego worries that giving up would in some way undermine its individuality, and therefore it resists spiritual development. This is something basic to be understood. The ego has to come to a peak. It has to be strong. It has to have attained integrity. Only then can you dissolve it. A weak ego can't really be dissolved. This is why Swami Vivekananda said, the old religion is one where he who does not believe in God is called an atheist, but the new religion says he who does not believe in himself is an atheist. He always emphasized strength. Sufi mystics and many Christian mystics as well seek to ripen the ego through love. Not I, but thou, thou. Rumi, a Sufi mystic, knew that the love for God that he experienced was leading him back to the deepest level of himself and his own intimate connection with the divine. For the secret of this love is in the dying of the small self. Here's a quote from one of his poems. There is no love greater than love with no object, for then you yourself have become love itself. When the compulsive, tyrannical self sees the inside beauty, it melts. You have suffered much agony, but you're still behind a veil, because dying was the one thing needed, and you haven't fulfilled it. Your agony will not end until you die. You cannot reach the roof without ascending the ladder. O Prince, you will not experience the wreck of this ship until you put into it the last kilo that will sink it. Wield the mace against yourself and shatter egotism to pieces. Let your candle be extinguished. Know that as long as our little stars are visible, the sun of the world has not appeared. End of quote. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, we read that the ripened ego is the ego of knowledge or of devotion, the ego purified and illuminated by knowledge or love of God. Some souls, after realizing their oneness with Brahman and Samadhi, come down to the plane of relative consciousness. In this state, they retain a very faint feeling of ego so that they can teach spiritual knowledge to others. This ego, called by Ramakrishna the ego of knowledge, doesn't altogether efface their knowledge of the oneness with Brahman, even in the relative state of consciousness. The bhakta, the lover of God, coming down to the relative plane after attaining samadhi, retains the I consciousness by which he feels he's a lover of God, or a child, or a servant. Sri Ramakrishna called this the devotee ego, the child ego, the servant ego. In some traditions, also, the path of selfless work has been practiced to subdue the ego. Brother Lawrence remained working where he was and realized the unity behind everything. He said that he was more united to God in his ordinary occupations than when he left for his devotions or in retirement, that there was no need for any art or science for going to God, but only a heart resolutely determined to apply itself to nothing but Him, or to do everything for His sake, and love him only. He said if one could pick up a straw for the love of God, that was all that was needed. St. Teresa of Avila was a most active nun, traveling here and there and teaching and founding new convents. Yet she's one of the most famous mystics of the Catholic Church. Those who stayed in group life and realized God right there always made prayer and meditation on God a big part of their lives. Even Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who recently became a saint or was declared a saint, and worked so much with the poor and dying in Calcutta, would always say to her workers that they must stop for the hours of prayer, and they would pray together. She once told someone that her work was based on 5 things. Ye have done it unto me. This very continuity of the spiritual practice is an important point, which is essential for the transformation of our character. I spoke in my last lecture about how we try through right actions to change the karmashaya, or web of our minds. This is our spiritual practice. This web, made up of impressions that we carry with us, causes our rebirth. A man dies, his body falls away and goes back to the elements, but the samskaras remain, adhering to the mind, which is made of a very fine material, and it doesn't dissolve. Because the finer the material, the more persistent it is. This is our character. It's the one thing that we take with us into our next birth. But even in the mind with its samskaras, it can also be dissolved in the long run. And that's what we're struggling for. As Patanjali's Yoga Sutra tells us, chittavritti nirodha, the end of the waves in the mind. The character of a man is what he's created for himself. It's the result of all the mental and physical activities that he's done in this and in past lives. The sum total of all the tendencies in the mind is the force which gives a man the next direction after his death. Every thought that arises in your mind does not die out entirely. It leaves a mark. And it leaves the future possibility of that wave coming out again. These are sufficiently strong to work beneath the surface. We mentioned last time, if good impressions prevail, the character becomes good. If bad, it becomes bad. If a man thinks good thoughts and does good works, the sum total of these impressions will be good, and they will force him to do more good action in spite of himself. Ramakrishna gave the example of a gifted musician who never plays the wrong note. He just automatically is playing the right notes. We see that through right action, it's possible for us to change these latent impressions in our mind, and thus, to some degree, to control our destiny. Through our actions now, we can change the neural pathways in the brain. This is called neuroplasticity, the ability of the neural synapses to change. Science is now proving what the ancient teachers told us for so long. Through spiritual practices such as meditation, it's possible to actually change the structure of our brain. By repeated action and thought, we change these pathways and we make ourselves more pure. Ripening the ego means I raise the consciousness until it merges with the self within. Swami Premashananda once wrote to a student, by gradually making yourself better and more complete, you will ultimately become perfect. This begins with cleansing the body and mind and making them bright, and ends in the transcending the body and the mind. If you purify your body and mind and make them luminous, that brightness will be reflected in your face. Then you will understand, I am neither the body nor the mind. Before that, you can't believe that you're something other than these. It's only for the sake of cleansing the heart that we have so many practices and preparations. Purifying the heart is the primary duty in life. When the heart becomes pure, the knowledge already present manifests itself spontaneously. Some of the qualities which the Gita tells us belong to the sattvic mind are compassion, non-attachment, non-injury, truthfulness, forgiveness, fearlessness, same-sidedness, and strength. These are qualities that will help us in our search for freedom. As we mentioned before, Ramakrishna says, liberation means entire freedom, freedom from the bondage of good, as well as from the bondage of evil. Quote, a golden chain is as much a chain as an iron one, Swami Vivekananda tells us. The example of the two thorns is often given. There's a thorn in my finger, I take it out with another thorn, and then I throw them both away. The first thorn is the ignorance. The second thorn is your good actions. But in the end, you're to try to rise above both. What happens is that the bad tendencies are counteracted by the good ones, and the bad impressions on the mind can be removed by waves of good ones until evil almost disappears, or it's subdued and held in one corner of the mind. And then if God is gracious, we can rise above both. Swami Vivekananda, in his Song of the Sannyasin, says, let one put garlands on, another kick this frame. What praise or praise can be where praiser praised and blamer blamed are one? Thus be thou calm, Sannyasin bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. Abhyasa, or practice, is also very important. And it actually is the way that the repeating of the name of God works so well. Every time a person repeats the name of God or does japa, it makes an impression on the mind. And they say, if you do it enough, one can pray without ceasing. The name of God becomes a flow of one thought in the mind, and it makes a deep impression. This means that it becomes easier and easier to remember and think of God. It's as though a virus has taken over your computer. A good one, of course. It's often said that one Swami used to say, religion is caught, not taught. It seems to have a life of its own. Actually, holy company is another very important factor in spiritual life. Our minds are elevated by the minds around us, and spirituality is actually given to us, as it were, through these associations. I used to notice when I was around one Swami that my mantra would automatically start in my heart. I became aware of it, and I found out then that this particular Swami was known to be adept at japa. And I figured out that it was probably just because he was doing japa all the time that my own mantra would spontaneously arise. I want to tell you one story of a nun in San Francisco. This was an old nun who was on the point of death. And she couldn't, she could barely speak. And there was a young nun with her. And when the young nun was there, she said, "Are you remembering your mantra?" And the older nun said, "Sometimes I can't remember." And so the young nun put her hand on her heart and said, "It's all right, it's there." And then the older nun smiled and said, "Yes, with every beat of my heart, I'm sending my love to God." That's what is meant by prayer without ceasing. There are certain works which are, as it were, an aggregate, a sum total of a large number of small works. If we stand near a seashore and hear the waves, we think it's a great noise, but it's really composed of millions and millions of minute waves, and each one of these is making its own noise, and yet we don't catch it. It's only when they become an aggregate that we hear it. Similarly, every pulsation of the heart is work. Certain kinds of work we feel and they become tangible to us. But actually, we're working every moment of our lives. Swamiji once said, if you really want to judge the character of a man, look not at his great performances. Every fool can become a hero at one time or another. Watch a man do his most common actions. Those are indeed the things which will tell you the character of a great man. Great occasions rouse even the lowest human beings to some kind of greatness, but he alone is really great, whose character is always the same, great wherever he may be. The desire to do good is the highest motive power we have, the desire to know God. Swamiji tells us we must remember that it is a privilege to help others. We work and we constantly do good because it's a blessing to ourselves, and that's the only way that we can become perfect. It's an entire mistake to think that we're going to really do good to the world. It's a great blessing to be able to help anyone. It's a privilege to be allowed to worship God by helping our fellow men. But in helping anyone, we are actually helping ourselves. We're purifying our own minds, and this is the ripening of the ego. It's extremely difficult to see beyond the surface to the essence that is in every person, to the essence which is also behind ourselves. We tend to identify with our superficial personalities and experiences, to work with the surface phenomena at the same time that we're aware of the truth behind it is extremely difficult. Yet this is our goal. The knower of truth is always aware of it, in and behind everything. One question is, do we have to stop our external search first and then turn inward to realize God? They say, then and only then are we capable of giving true unselfish service. Swamiji, in one sense, seems to say this in his God in Everything lecture. He speaks of renunciation, yet he goes on to say, what is it that you're to give up? Give up the world to which we've been clinging for so long. It's a false world of our own creation. Give that up. Open your eyes and see that as such it never existed. It was a dream. It was Maya. What existed was the Lord Himself. So do our work by giving up the apparent illusory world, seeing God everywhere, work incessantly, holding life as something deified, as God Himself, and knowing that this is all we have to do. God is in everything. Where else shall we go to find Him? He's in every work. Thus the effects of work won't bind us. But he tells us that this self is first to be heard about, then to be thought on and meditated upon. We have to meditate on it, and out of the fullness of the heart, then the hand can work. See the oneness and work on. Sri Ramakrishna tells us that true discrimination is sat asat vastu viveka, separating the real from the unreal. What does this mean? He says it's very simple. God alone is real, everything else is unreal. He saw the world as a play of God, as consciousness itself. He understood that everything is in essence divine, and he demonstrated the bliss that such understanding brings to a person. Swami Vivekananda repeatedly said that Vedanta has to be practical. We have to be able to carry it out in every part of our lives. The ideals of religion must cover the whole field of life. They have to enter into our thoughts and more into practice. Fill yourselves with the ideal, and then all your actions will be magnified, transformed, deified by the very power of that thought. Bring this thought to bear in your life. Swamiji tells us the first step is to teach this truth to ourselves and to others. To be able to use what we call viveka or discrimination in every moment of our lives, in every one of our actions, to discriminate between what is right and wrong, dharma, adharma, vastu viveka. To use it to know what should be done and should not be done, kara, akara, vastu viveka. And then in the end to realize the truth, sat, asat, vastu viveka, what is real, true, and what is unreal. To know this, we have to know the test of truth, which is purity and oneness. Love binds and then releases us. Love makes for that oneness. It is the attracting force. Therefore, in all our actions, we have to judge whether it is making for diversity or oneness. Everything we see in this world of apparent diversity can be looked at as Satchidananda, being, consciousness, bliss, and name and form. We get caught up in the names and the forms and forget the reality, the oneness of everything. In and through the self, all knowledge comes. Swamiji tells us, how else would you teach a practical God? Where is a more practical God than He whom I see before me, God omnipresent in every being? For you are He, the omnipresent, almighty God, the soul of your souls. I know it, whether I realize it at all times or not. He is the oneness, the unity in all. This living God can be worshipped through service, physical, such as food or medicine, intellectual, through teaching, or spiritual. Swamiji says that love is the highest worship, a love that is all-embracing and universal. He says, do you feel for others? If you are, then you're growing in oneness. So love as you breathe to live. What you want is character, a strengthening of the will. Bring in the light and the evil goes out in a moment. Build up your character and manifest your real nature, the effulgent, resplendent, ever pure, and call it up in everyone that you see or meet. I shall call you religious, he says, from the day you begin to see God in men and women. What comes to you is but the Lord, the Eternal, the Blessed One, appearing to us in various forms, as our Father, our mother, our friend, our child. They're our own soul playing with us. He's in everything. He is everything. Every man and woman is the palpable, blissful, living God. Who says God is unknown? Everywhere He is eternally known, eternally worshipped, Swamiji tells us. This is a very practical thing, a practical form of worship we can all practice. If we can just try to always remember the good thing that another has done, instead of dwelling on the fault, we ourselves will become peaceful. If we look at the fault, we're only making ourselves and others miserable, because as soon as we dwell on a fault, we bring it into our own mind. Holy Mother said you can't even see a fault in another if you don't already have it in your own mind. We have to give up the world. And when the world is given up, what remains? God. So in everything, open your eyes and see Him, Swamiji tells us. Doing good to others is the one great universal religion. It is said, do good and be good. This is how one should live in the world. The Bhagavad Gita also tells us how we should work in the world. With the mind purified by devotion to performance of action and the body conquered and senses subdued, one realizes oneself as the self in all beings. Though acting, he is not tainted. The knower of truth, being centered in the self, should think, I do nothing at all. Though seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, going out, sleeping, breathing, speaking, letting go, holding on, opening and closing the eyes, convinced that it is the senses only moving among the sense objects. He who does action forsaking attachment, resigning them to Brahman, is not soiled by evil, like a lotus leaf on the water. Devotees in the path of work perform action only with body, mind, and senses and intellect, forsaking attachment for the purification of heart. These are all translations of verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Then in the 16th chapter, there's a long list of all the different wonderful qualities that can bring you into this knowledge. Things such as fearlessness, purity of heart, steadfastness in knowledge, control of the senses, sacrifice. It goes on. Forgiveness, fortitude, purity, absence of hatred. These are all the qualities that are needed for the divine state. And these are all things which can be practiced to purify our character. We've been talking about changing the impressions of our mind in order to ultimately attain to freedom. Not too long ago, Swami spoke here, and in the course of the talk, he asked a very pertinent question. What do we mean when we say something is good? Have you really thought about it? What is the definition of goodness or right action? He put it into 3 categories. He said truthfulness, purity, faith, and prayer. There's a beautiful statement in the Mahabharata where Duryodhana, the supposedly wicked cousin, says that he wants to be good, but he's impelled to do evil. He's a victim of his own inner tendencies. All of us are a mixture of good and evil, of bad traits and good ones, of ignorance and knowledge. Anything that binds us, deludes us, is what is evil. Anything that takes us toward God and frees us is good. What is truthfulness? In one place, it's defined as speaking the truth, but never a harsh truth. Another says it's being in harmony with what is conducive to the welfare of the whole world, Jagat Hitaya Cha, as the last part of our motto of the order goes. It's not always easy to practice in our daily lives, but Ramakrishna really stressed truthfulness above all other virtues. He said, I prayed to the Divine Mother, Mother, here is thy knowledge, here is thy ignorance. Take them both, Mother, and give me pure love for thee. Here is thy holiness, here is thy unholiness. Take them both, and give me pure love for thee. I even said, here is thy good, here is thy evil. Take them both, Mother, and give me pure love for thee. I said, here's thy righteousness, here is thy unrighteousness. But I could not say, here is thy truth, here is thy falsehood. Take them both. I gave up everything at her feet, but I could not bring myself to give up the truth. He says, even those engaged in worldly activities such as office work and business should try to hold on to the truth. Truthfulness alone is spiritual discipline in the Kali Yuga, he tells us. It's difficult to practice other disciplines in this time, but if the man holds on to the truth, he will realize God. It's said that if a man practices real truthfulness for 12 years, everything that he says will become truth. He'll be unable to speak an untruth. And what is truth? As I said before, Ramakrishna tells us it is God alone is real. Everything else is unreal. This is the truth about ourselves and about everybody else. What about purity? The truth is realized in the pure heart. When we're pure, our ignorance is removed and the truth shines in us. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The Upanishads say he's understood in the pure and subtle intellect, which is seated in the lotus of the heart. This purity is necessary. Ramakrishna says God cannot be realized if there's the slightest attachment to things of the world. The thread cannot pass through the eye of the needle if the tiniest fiber sticks out. God is realized as soon as the mind becomes free from attachment. What appears in the mind is the voice of God, if the mind is pure. That which is pure mind is also pure buddhi, and that again is pure Atman, because there is nothing that is pure except God. And prayer. Can a person transform themselves through prayer? And the answer is yes. But you have to pray with wholehearted devotion, a one-pointed concentration. The higher forms of struggle take place in the depths of the heart, and prayer also can awaken the center. The center of the heart awakes, and it takes control of the vital powers of the person. Within the awakening of the higher centers of consciousness, one's thoughts get drawn inward, and the mind itself becomes interior. The psychic energy flows freely toward a spiritual center, and we become aware of the self, and self-remembrance becomes spontaneous and inclusive. We can listen internally and talk to God. Ramakrishna talked to the Divine Mother, and she answered him. God hears the prayers of the heart, and he answers. We should always dwell in the thought of God, practicing the presence of God. Ramakrishna says the prayer has to be sincere and one-pointed. He tells us to pray with tears in our eyes, to cry to your mother Shama with a real cryo mind. This purifies the heart. And faith is the root of all, he says. If a man has faith in God, he will surely be saved. One should have faith in the Guru's words, faith in the holy name given by the Guru, and with it practice spiritual discipline. There's a story of a man who wanted to cross the ocean. His teacher said, "Come with me," and he took him to the edge of the ocean, and he wrote something on a leaf and tied it in the corner of his cloth. Then he said, "Now you can walk on water." So the man set out, and sure enough, he was walking on water without any problem at all. But after some time he thought, what is this wonderful thing that he's given me? So he reached down to the hem of his cloth and pulled it up and untied it and looked inside, and there was the leaf with the name of Rama on it. And he thought, oh, only the name of Rama? And immediately he sank. So you have to have faith. The human personality contains 5 planes, or koshas, according to the Taittiriya Upanishad. The physical, the Annamaya kosha, the vital, the Pranamaya kosha, the mental, the Manomaya kosha, the intuitional, the Vijnanamaya kosha, and the blissful, the Anandamaya kosha. The true self, or the Atman, is beyond any of these planes, yet it permeates all levels of consciousness. And because it is consciousness itself, but in ordinary life it gets identified with one of these planes. The evolution of consciousness then requires us to shift it to a higher level. The first 3 shis, that is the Annamaya kosha, the Pranamaya kosha, and the Manomaya kosha, together constitute the ego, or the lower self. And the remaining 2, the Vijnanamaya kosha and the Anandamaya kosha, form the higher self. The attitude, moves, behaviors, even the appearance of a person depends on which level or which self he is identifying himself with, where his center of consciousness is. When the body needs are being attended to, the center remains on the physical level. When a person's overcome by strong passions, like anger and greed, the center moves up to the vital plane. When he's engaged in thinking or study, the center moves to the mental plane. The shifting of the center among the 3 lower planes is mostly an unconscious action. It's going on continually throughout our day-to-day lives. But shifting the center to the plane of spiritual intuition needs a fully conscious and disciplined effort, and through transformation of consciousness itself. The disciplines by which consciousness is transformed is known as yoga or sadhana. We discussed many of them before. It's important to know that if an individual has an spiritual experience, but his consciousness is only developed to the lower levels of mind, for instance, if his ego isn't ripe, then he won't be able to understand that spiritual experience in a broad way, and he won't be able to integrate it. On the contrary, he's more likely to distort the experience, for people tend to interpret their religious or spiritual experiences according to the level of mental development where they're resting. Swami Vivekananda once said, when a prophet got into the superconscious state by heightening his emotional nature, he brought away from it not only some truth, but also some fanaticism as well. And there was some superstition which he brought with him, which injured the world. Even though a person has spiritual experiences, if he hasn't transcended his own ego, then his connection with the divine will be distorted and filtered through his immature mind, and thus it can lead to messiah complexes or people being unable to integrate their experiences. An undisciplined life makes the mind restless, and it dissipates the powers. It's important for a superconscious spiritual experience to be supported by the corresponding heightened psychological development. Material knowledge without spiritual growth can be counterproductive, as there's something crucial missing in human awareness that causes us to fall victim to all sorts of delusions and distortions. Swami Ashokananda, one of the early swamis in America during the hippie era, commented that in Berkeley was such a good place to live. There's an incarnation on every corner. The Vedas refers to this as avidya, ignorance, and they explain that we need to reach a certain stage in consciousness for this avidya to dissolve. Even the disciples of Ramakrishna did tapasya and practiced after the passing of the Master. When someone asked them why they, who had already realized God, needed to practice at all, Swami Brahmananda said that the realizations that Ramakrishna gave to them were like a gift. But in order to teach others, in order to be complete in himself, they had to practice to make these experiences their own. Yoga involves two basic practices, purification and concentration. All yogas aim at one thing, the transformation of consciousness. This is something that every person has to do for himself. Each person has his own yoga, his own combination of the four yogas. And as I said before, at first this process of transformation is restricted to limited parts of our personality in certain times of the day. But through practice, the transformation involves the whole personality, and it goes on constantly, all the time. The spiritual and secular are no longer separated. This is the spiritual solution to the problems of life, and it's done through self-effort and faith in one's own higher self. Thus, the transformation of character and consciousness is absolutely necessary for us in any path we follow toward God realization. The subconscious, the conscious, and superconscious states of mind have been discussed in both science and psychology. When we first ask, "Who am I?" and sit down to meditate, we start to see into ourselves, and many things which were hidden before come up. You may react to them again, but you don't have to. You can be the witness and look at them and understand what they are. These are just stored impressions. By bringing them up to the light of your consciousness, you can actually offer them to God and look at them and allow them to pass away. These are not real experiences now. It's only a layer of the subconscious exposing itself to your inner vision, indicating that you now can reprogram them into higher thoughts and practice meditation. The subconscious can be made peaceful through a contemplative lifestyle. The devotee can sit quietly and allow these lower thoughts to pass and higher knowledge to be focused in his mind. He attains a certain stability of mind. One is able to sit quietly and observe the many thoughts without being affected by them. The intuitive knowledge that we're pure consciousness gives a stability that allows the person to move from concentration into deeper meditation. The feeling of the eternity of the moment is experienced, and the subconscious becomes quiescent and purified. In the end, we know that we're not just an instinctive being or an intellectual being, driven by impulses of the five senses. There is a totality of being, a divine light within us. One knows that there's no past or future, and the only reality is the eternity of the moment. When the mind is purified and concentrated, its movements become harmonious and centralized. There's only one indivisible, all-pervading, and immanent reality, Brahman. The Vedic metaphysics make it clear that it is only in this stage of Turiya, the highest level of superconsciousness, that a person experiences this state and understands the one supreme reality, God, in all its magnitude, and the effects of Maya, the cosmic illusion, dissolve. Thus the whole consciousness is lifted up to a higher level. The poet Rumi says, "O man, go die before thou diest, so that thou wilt not have to suffer the death when thou shalt die. Such a death that thou wilt enter into light, not a death through which thou wilt enter into the grave." It is in the superconscious state that intuitive flashes of knowledge are known. All mystical knowledge and deeper spiritual knowledge comes through this state of mind. Beyond is the mind of light, beautiful, pure, and vast. Beyond the mind itself is the Atman, the blissful reality, full and pure, the light that illumines all. Ramakrishna said pure mind and pure Brahman are one. According to Shankara, the light of the Atman is reflected through the buddhi, the manas, the senses, and the body. In ordinary life, this inner light is all projected outward. It is with this light, the light of clear consciousness, that we see all the objects in the external world. If we want to realize Atman, or God, we have to turn the light inward. First, the senses have to be turned inward. Then the manas, the mind, has to be turned inward by focusing it in the heart. When the heart holds the mind steady, the image of the deity becomes living, and all other thoughts are stilled. When the buddhi, the will, is focused inward, the door of the inner heart opens, and the light of the Atman shines through in all its glory, and the character and consciousness of a person are truly transformed. Om Dyo Shantir Antariksham Shanti Prithvi Shantir Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Vishwe Deva Shantir Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantireti Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace is in the heaven, peace is in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. The herbs, the plants, and the trees are all full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May this universal peace enter our soul and being. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.